Dr. Marcus Webb stared at his coffee mug like it had personally insulted his mother. The synthetic caffeine substitute tasted like liquid disappointment, which was fitting since that pretty much summed up his entire career aboard the New Horizons research station. 3 years of cataloging alien microbes and filing reports that nobody read. Living the dream, really. Dr. Webb, we have a situation, came the voice of his research partner Vrex from across the lab. The Zentarian's 4 arms were typing furiously at 3 different workstations simultaneously, which would have been impressive if Webb hadn't seen him do it every day for the past 6 months. Vrex was what humans might call a control freak if control freaks had blue skin, 6 eyes and a nervous habit of clicking their mandibles when stressed. Let me guess, Webb said, not looking up from his microscope. The bioscanner is acting up again, and you think the coffee machine is contaminating the air filtration system. Negative. The anomaly is in the human blood samples from yesterday's health screening. Vrex's mandibles clicked faster. The readings are unprecedented. Webb finally looked up, one eyebrow raised. Unprecedented? How? Did you discover I'm actually part robot? Because that would explain a lot about my dating life. Your blood work shows elevated levels of epinephrine, norepinephrine and cortisol. Also elevated glucose, increased oxygen consumption, and accelerated heart rate during the stress portion of the examination. Vrex's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, which Webb had learned meant he was either confused or about to suggest they run more tests. These levels would be considered dangerous performance enhancement in most species. Vrex, buddy, that's called being human, Webb said, returning to his microscope. We call it adrenaline. It happens when we're stressed, excited, or forced to sit through mandatory health screenings. Webb, these chemical compounds are restricted substances in 17 different galactic jurisdictions. The Felperian Trade Union classifies them as Class A combat stimulants. The Krillian Empire requires special permits to synthesize them, and the Zentarian Health Ministry considers them dangerous narcotics. Webb looked up again, this time with both eyebrows raised. Are you telling me that what humans naturally produce when someone cuts us off in traffic is considered military-grade drugs by the rest of the galaxy? That is, an accurate summary. Yes. Vrex's mandibles went silent, which was never a good sign. Dr. Webb, I am required by Zentarian law to report any discovery of illegal substance production to the appropriate authorities. Vrex, no. Webb stood up suddenly, feeling that familiar surge of energy that came with impending bureaucratic disaster. You cannot file a report saying humans are walking drug factories. Do you have any idea what kind of paperwork nightmare that would create? The law is clear, Dr. Webb. I must report this within the next standard cycle, or I will be in violation of my research permit. Vrex's lower set of eyes focused on his datapad while his upper set watched Webb nervously. Perhaps it is simply a calibration error. We could run additional tests to confirm. Webb felt his heart rate spike, which was probably just proving Vrex's point about human combat drugs. But when the Galactic Council declares us a threat to intergalactic peace because we get hyped up during action movies, I'm putting you down as a reference on my unemployment forms. I do not understand the reference to action movies, but I will note your concerns in my report, Vrex replied, missing the sarcasm entirely. Webb rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Just another Tuesday on the New Horizons station, where scientific discovery met galactic bureaucracy and somehow always resulted in humans looking like the dangerous weirdos of the universe. Run your tests, Vrex. But maybe keep this between us until we know what we're dealing with, okay? Vrex's mandibles clicked once, slowly. Of course, Dr. Webb. What could possibly go wrong? 48 hours later, Webb discovered exactly what could go wrong when Captain Rosa Torres burst into his lab looking like she'd been chewing on plasma conduits. Webb, what the hell did you do? Torres was the kind of woman who could stare down a black hole and ask it to move out of her way. Seeing her this agitated was like watching a mountain have a nervous breakdown. Good morning to you too, Captain. I've been great, thanks for asking. Webb didn't look up from his latest batch of test results. If this is about the coffee machine in Lab 3, I maintain that it achieved sentience first and I was merely defending myself. The Galactic Council just issued an emergency session about humans, Torres said, her voice dropping to that tone that usually preceded someone getting launched out of an airlock. Apparently we're now classified as a biological weapons system. Webb's stylus froze halfway to his datapad. Come again. 20 minutes ago I got a priority transmission from Earth Command. All humans in diplomatic positions are being recalled immediately. All humans in research positions are being recalled immediately. All humans in any position where we might interact with alien species are being recalled immediately. Torres moved closer to Webb's workstation. Care to explain why the galaxy suddenly thinks we're walking chemical warfare factories? Webb slowly turned to look at Vrex, who was attempting to blend into his workstation like some kind of blue six-eyed chameleon. Vrex, please tell me you didn't file that report. Zentorian law is very clear about mandatory reporting procedures. Vrex said in a voice barely above a whisper. I submitted the findings to the appropriate authorities as required. The appropriate authorities being who exactly? Torres asked, her tone suggesting that someone was about to become very inappropriate with the nearest airlock. The Zentorian Health Ministry, the Felparian Trade Commission, the Krillian Imperial Science Division, and the Galactic Council's Committee on Biological Hazards. Vrex listed off, his mandibles clicking faster with each organization. Standard protocol for discovery of controlled substances. Webb felt that familiar surge of adrenaline, which was probably not helping his case for humans being harmless. Vrex, those are the three most paranoid species in the galaxy. The Zentorians think hand sanitizer is a weapon of mass destruction. To be fair, Torres said the Felparians did try to ban chocolate last year because they thought it was an addictive psychotropic. That's because chocolate is addictive to Felparians, Webb said. They metabolize sugar like humans metabolize alcohol. One candy bar, and they're doing interpretive dance in the corridors. As if summoned by the mention of his species, Ambassador Quillen appeared on the main communication screen, all 7 of his eye stalks waving in what Webb had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. Felparians looked like someone had crossed an octopus with a giraffe and then given the result anxiety medication. Captain Torres, thank the cosmic void you are still alive, Quillen declared, his voice carrying that peculiar warbling quality that made every Felparian sound like they were talking through a wind tunnel. We have received most disturbing reports about your species' natural pharmaceutical production capabilities. Ambassador Quillen, Torres said with forced politeness. I assure you that any reports about human pharmaceutical production have been greatly exaggerated. Exaggerated. Captain, the reports state that humans naturally synthesize combat stimulants that would render most species capable of extraordinary feats of violence and endurance. Your people are walking drug laboratories. This explains so much about human behavior patterns. Webb stepped into view of the screen. Ambassador, with all due respect, what you're calling combat drugs is just how humans respond to stress. It's basic biology. Dr. Webb, is it not true that these substances can increase human strength, speed and pain tolerance to dangerous levels? Quillen's eye stalks focused on Webb like biological targeting systems. Well yes and is it not true that humans can produce these substances on demand simply by becoming agitated or threatened? Technically yes then humans are indeed biological weapons platforms capable of chemically enhanced combat performance. Quillen's eye stalks began waving frantically. The Galactic Council has voted. All humans must be removed from positions where they might pose a threat to galactic peace and security. Torres stepped forward, and Webb could practically see her adrenaline levels spiking. Ambassador, you're talking about removing an entire species from galactic society because we have a stress response. A stress response that produces military-grade performance enhancers, Captain. Surely you understand our concern. Webb looked at Torres, then at Vrex, then back at the screen where Ambassador Quillen was still waving his eye stalks like a biological lava lamp. This is insane. Next you'll be telling us that humans can't participate in galactic society because we sweat salt water. Actually, Vrex said quietly, salt water is considered a corrosive industrial chemical by 14 different species. Webb stared at his research partner. Vrex, please tell me you didn't file a separate report about human perspiration. I may have mentioned it as a secondary observation. Torres closed her eyes and took a deep breath, which was probably producing enough combat drugs to concern half the galaxy. I need a drink. A very strong drink. Preferably something that won't get humans banned from 3 more star systems. Over the next few days, Webb learned that galactic paranoia spread faster than gossip at a high school reunion. The station's alien crew members had started treating him and Torres like they were walking around with signs that read caution contains explosives. Kellex, the Regalian botanist, now crossed to the opposite side of corridors when he saw Webb approaching. Yesterday, Webb had sneezed during a routine meeting, and 3 different species had evacuated the conference room. Even the vending machines seemed to be dispensing his snacks more cautiously. This is ridiculous, Webb muttered, watching as a group of Altarian technicians literally tiptoeing past the lab entrance. I'm a xenobiologist, not a berserker. To be fair, Dr. Webb, Vrex said, his mandibles clicking nervously as he monitored Webb's vital signs on a portable scanner. Your heart rate does increase significantly when you express frustration. That's called being annoyed, Vrex. It's a normal human emotion. Webb gestured at the scanner. And stop monitoring my biometrics like I'm about to explode. The Zentorian safety protocol clearly states that individuals capable of producing combat stimulants should be monitored for signs of aggressive enhancement. Vrex's 4 arms were typing notes faster than Webb could follow. Your current adrenaline levels are elevated beyond normal parameters. My adrenaline levels are elevated because everyone on this station is treating me like I'm made of unstable plutonium. The lab doors hissed open, and Torres walked in, followed by what appeared to be a walking pile of expensive fabric with too many arms. Webb recognized the species immediately, Krellian, which meant this was either going to be very profitable or very illegal, possibly both. Webb, meet Merchant Blix of the Krellian Trade Consortium, Torres said, her expression suggesting that this conversation had already gone places she didn't want to revisit. He has a business proposition. Blix stepped forward, his 6 arms adorned with enough jewelry to fund a small space station. Krellians looked like someone had decided that regular humanoids needed more arms and better fashion sense. Dr. Webb, such an honor to meet a natural pharmaceutical producer. I'm sorry, what now? Webb looked at Torres, who was making a face like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. Merchant Blix here wants to discuss purchasing human adrenaline for the black market, Torres said flatly. Apparently what we produce naturally sells for about 3,000 credits per gram in Krellian space. 3,000. Webb's eyebrows shot up, which probably registered as hostile intent on Vrix's scanner. For adrenaline, Dr. Webb, you must understand, Blix said, his multiple arms gesturing enthusiastically. What humans call adrenaline is impossibly expensive to synthesize. The Krellian military pays enormous sums for combat enhancers that provide even half the performance boost your species generates naturally. We could make both our peoples very wealthy. So let me get this straight, Webb said, feeling his stress levels climbing as Vrix's scanner started beeping more frantically. The galaxy thinks we're dangerous because we naturally produce combat drugs, but now you want to buy those same drugs from us. Exactly. Supply and demand, Dr. Webb. Your species has an unlimited supply of what the galaxy desperately wants. Blix's eyes gleamed with the unmistakable look of someone calculating profit margins. I am prepared to offer exclusive purchasing contracts for human combat essence. Think of it as a pharmaceutical export business. Torres stepped between Webb and Blix. Merchant Blix, I already explained that humans can't just bottle their stress hormones and sell them at the space mall. But surely there must be a way to extract the substances. Perhaps during moments of high stress. I have heard that humans can increase production through physical exertion or psychological pressure. Webb felt something snap in his brain, and Vrix's scanner started emitting a steady alarm tone. Oh, you want a demonstration of human combat drug production? Fine. Dr. Webb, please do not, Vrix began, but Webb was already moving. Webb dropped to the floor and started doing jumping jacks with the enthusiasm of someone who had spent 3 days being treated like a living weapon. This is how humans produce combat drugs, Merchant Blix. We call it exercise. The scanner in Vrix's hands was now beeping like a smoke detector, and Blix was backing toward the door with his 6 arms raised defensively. Dr. Webb, please, there is no need for aggressive enhancement. Aggressive enhancement. Webb switched to push-ups, counting loudly. This is just basic human fitness. 1, 2, 3. With each number, Vrix's scanner got more agitated, and Blix got more nervous. The human is entering combat preparation mode. Blix shouted, scrambling for the door. This is exactly what the reports warned about. It's cardio, you idiots. Webb called after him, but Blix was already fleeing down the corridor, presumably to tell the entire trade consortium that he'd witnessed a human voluntarily entering a chemical combat enhancement state. Torres looked down at Webb, who was still doing push-ups out of spite. Feel better? Surprisingly, yes. Webb stood up, breathing slightly harder than normal, which made Vrix's scanner sound like a crisis alert. Though I think I may have just confirmed every stereotype about humans being unstable drug-producing maniacs. Dr. Webb, Vrix said quietly, staring at his scanner in fascination. Your biochemical readings during that display were truly remarkable. The sustained elevation of performance compounds, the coordinated physical response, the maintained cognitive function despite chemical stimulation. It is actually quite impressive. Thanks, Vrix. I think that's the first compliment you've ever given my species. It was not intended as a compliment, Vrix replied seriously. It was a scientific observation about your terrifying biological capabilities. Webb looked at Torres, who was shaking her head with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. I'm starting to think this whole situation might get worse before it gets better. You think? Torres said. Because I just got word that the Ravager fleet has been spotted 3 systems away, and they're heading in our direction. Apparently word has gotten out that our station is staffed by dangerous humans who might be too drugged up to fight effectively. Webb felt his adrenaline spike again, and Vrex's scanner immediately started its alarmed beeping. Pirates? Coming here? Now? Perfect timing, right, Torres said grimly. Just when the galaxy thinks we're walking pharmacies, actual bad guys decide to test the theory. 6 hours later, Webb was discovering that impending pirate attacks did wonderful things for his stress levels. He was also discovering that Vrex's portable scanner could apparently detect human biochemical changes from 3 rooms away, which explained why the Zentaurian had been following him around like a nervous blue shadow. Dr. Webb, your combat drug production has increased by 47% since the threat assessment began, Vrex reported, consulting his scanner with the dedication of someone monitoring a nuclear reactor. Should I be concerned about potential hostile enhancement episodes? Vrex, if you call it a hostile enhancement episode one more time, I'm going to show you what actual human hostility looks like, Webb said, checking the seal on his emergency kit for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. It's called being nervous. We're about to be attacked by space pirates. Nervousness is the appropriate response. The station's emergency lighting had been activated, bathing everything in that lovely shade of red that made everyone look like they were dying of blood loss. Most of the alien research staff had been evacuated to the inner sections, leaving behind a skeleton crew that consisted of Torres, Webb, Vrex, and 3 Altarian technicians who were probably regretting their career choices. Incoming transmission, announced the station's AI in that artificially calm voice that somehow made everything sound more ominous. Priority Alpha. Source unknown vessel, Ravager configuration. The main screen flickered to life, revealing what could only be described as the poster child for why you shouldn't let pirates decorate their own ships. Captain Scar looked like someone had taken a standard humanoid template and decided to add more scars, more teeth, and significantly more attitude problems. His ship's bridge was apparently decorated in early apocalypse style, with warning lights, exposed wiring, and what appeared to be someone's skeleton mounted on the wall as a conversation piece. New Horizons Research Station, Scar announced, his voice carrying the kind of gravelly quality that suggested he'd been gargling with industrial solvent. This is Captain Scar of the Ravager fleet. Surrender immediately, and we might let some of you live. Torres stepped into view of the transmission, her expression suggesting that Scar had just volunteered for a very unpleasant anatomy lesson. Captain Scar, this is Captain Torres of the New Horizons. You're attacking a civilian research facility. Stand down immediately. Scar laughed, which sounded like rocks being mixed in a cement mixer. Captain Torres, we've heard all about your station's special human crew. Word is you've got a couple of combat drug addicts who are probably so high on their own chemicals they can barely stand up straight. Webb felt something cold settle in his stomach, which his adrenaline system immediately interpreted as a threat requiring immediate chemical intervention. Vrex's scanner started beeping like a caffeinated smoke detector. You've been misinformed, Captain, Torres said evenly. The humans aboard this station are research personnel, not combatants. Right, Scar said, his scarred face splitting into what might charitably be called a grin. Research personnel who naturally produce military-grade performance enhancers. The galaxy's buzzing with stories about how dangerous you humans are when you're all drugged up. Problem is, we've done our homework. Your homework? Webb asked, stepping into the transmission range. He noticed that Scar's crew was wearing what appeared to be standard anti-narcotic gear complete with chemical filtration systems. See, the thing about combat drugs, Scar explained with the patience of someone explaining simple concepts to particularly slow children, is that they make you unpredictable, violent, uncontrolled, great for berserker attacks, terrible for coordinated defense. We've fought plenty of species hopped up on combat stims. They charge around like maniacs for about 10 minutes, then crash harder than a meteor. Torres and Webb exchanged glances. Torres's expression suggested she was calculating exactly how many different ways she could dismantle Scar's ship with her bare hands, while Webb was beginning to appreciate the irony of the situation. So here's the deal, Scar continued. We know you've got maybe 2 humans on that station, both of them probably so high on their own adrenaline they can't think straight. My crew outnumbers you 15 to 1, and we're not chemical-dependent psychopaths. This is going to be the easiest raid we've ever pulled. Captain Scar, Webb said, feeling his heart rate climbing as his body prepared for what was coming. I think you may have misunderstood a few things about human biochemistry. What's to misunderstand? You produce combat drugs. Combat drugs make you crazy. Crazy people can't fight tactically. Scar shrugged with the confidence of someone who had clearly never encountered actual humans in combat. We'll be docking in 20 minutes. Try not to overdose before we get there. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in the kind of silence that usually preceded very bad decisions. Well, Torres said after a moment, that was enlightening. Captain Torres, Vrex said quietly, his scanner now emitting a steady, almost musical tone. Dr. Webb's biochemical readings are unlike anything I have previously recorded. His system appears to be entering a state of enhanced preparedness while maintaining full cognitive function. Webb looked down at his hands, which were perfectly steady despite the fact that his heart was hammering like a construction crew. His vision seemed sharper, his hearing more acute, and his mind was running through tactical scenarios with the kind of clarity that usually required several cups of coffee. "Rex," Webb said slowly, "I think it's time you learned the difference between human combat drugs and actual combat drugs." "Dr. Webb." Rex's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "Real combat drugs make you stupid and aggressive. Human combat drugs make you smart and aggressive." Webb looked at Torres, who was displaying the kind of calm predatory focus that made hardened Marines nervous. "Captain Scar is about to learn that lesson the hard way." Torres smiled, and Webb realized that whatever was happening to his biochemistry was happening to hers as well. 15-2 odds, huh? Seems fair, Webb replied. "Should we warn them they're outnumbered?" "Dr. Webb," Captain Torres, Rex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your current biochemical states are producing readings that exceed every known parameter for combat enhancement. Yet you are both speaking in calm measured tones and displaying coordinated tactical thinking." "Rex," Torres said, checking her sidearm with practiced efficiency, "meet the human stress response. We don't get high on our own adrenaline, we get efficient." "And focused," Webb added, pulling up the station's defensive systems on his tablet. "And very annoyed at people who interrupt our research with threats of violence." Rex stared at his scanner, then at the two humans who were calmly preparing to defend their station against overwhelming odds. "This is not what the reports described." "The reports," Webb said, feeling that familiar surge of energy that meant his body was preparing for whatever came next, "were written by people who've never seen humans do what we do best." "Which is?" Rex asked. Torres and Webb looked at each other and smiled with the kind of expression that had been making pirates nervous since humans first took to the stars. "Survive," they said in unison. 18 minutes later, Webb was crouched behind an overturned lab table in Section C, discovering that his body's chemical enhancement system had some truly impressive features he'd never needed before. His hands were rock steady as he calibrated a jury-rigged plasma cutter. His heart rate was elevated but controlled, and his mind was processing tactical information with the kind of clarity that made everything seem like it was happening in slow motion. "Rex, you still monitoring my biochemistry over there?" Webb whispered into his comm unit while watching the corridor through a reflective surface he'd positioned for surveillance. "Dr. Webb, your readings are extraordinary," came Rex's voice from the secured command center where he'd barricaded himself with the remaining alien crew. "Your system is maintaining peak performance enhancement while your cognitive functions remain completely stable. This should be physiologically impossible." "Yeah, well, evolution's funny that way," Webb muttered, watching as three heavily armed pirates moved past his position. "Torres, I've got eyes on the boarding party's advance team. They're moving like they expect us to be stumbling around high as kites." "Copy that." Torres's voice came through the comm with the kind of calm professionalism that suggested her adrenal system was working just as efficiently as his. "I'm in position at the main junction. These idiots are walking into a crossfire without even checking their corners." Webb smiled, feeling that peculiar combination of alertness and serenity that came with his body's natural combat cocktail. Scar wasn't entirely wrong about human combat drugs making us different, he just got the details backwards. "How so, Dr. Webb?" Rex asked, his scientific curiosity apparently overriding his terror. "Real combat stims make you feel invincible and stupid," Webb explained, watching as more pirates moved through the corridor with the tactical awareness of particularly aggressive furniture. "Human adrenaline makes you feel mortal and smart. Big difference." The first pirate rounded the corner exactly when Webb's enhanced reflexes had calculated he would. Webb's modified plasma cutter discharged with surgical precision, overloading the pirate's weapon systems and leaving him standing there holding what was essentially an expensive paperweight. "What the pirate began, just as Torres appeared behind him with the kind of silent efficiency that suggested her natural stealth enhancement was working perfectly. "Sleep tight," Torres said cheerfully, applying a sleeper hold with textbook precision. The pirate collapsed with barely a sound. "Target 1 down," Torres reported. "Webb, your enhanced pattern recognition was spot on. They're moving exactly like you predicted." "It's not enhanced pattern recognition, it's just pattern recognition," Webb replied, repositioning to his next planned location. "Turns out when your brain isn't being chemically scrambled, you can actually think during combat. Revolutionary concept." Through his comm, Webb could hear Vrex frantically taking notes. "Dr. Webb, are you experiencing any loss of fine motor control, impaired judgment, reduced pain sensitivity?" "Vrex, I'm experiencing improved fine motor control, enhanced judgment, and appropriate pain sensitivity. Webb said, carefully positioning a feedback loop in the station's power grid that would give the next group of pirates a very unpleasant surprise. That's the point of natural stress enhancement. It makes you better at not dying. This is fascinating, Vrex said. The galactic literature on combat enhancement suggests that chemical stimulation inevitably leads to impaired decision-making and reckless behavior. That's because the galactic literature is based on artificial stimulants, Torres said, her voice barely audible as she moved through the ventilation system with enhanced agility. Synthetic drugs are designed to override natural limitations. Human stress response is designed to optimize natural capabilities. Webb heard footsteps approaching his position and felt his senses sharpen even further. Time seemed to slow as his enhanced reflexes calculated angles, distances, and timing with mathematical precision. Second wave incoming, he reported. 5 targets, moving in standard breach formation. They're still assuming we're impaired. Their mistake, Torres replied. Engaging now. What happened next was, from Webb's perspective, a perfectly choreographed demonstration of human biochemical enhancement in action. His modified plasma cutter disabled 2 weapons simultaneously while Torres dropped from the ventilation system behind the remaining pirates with timing that would have made an Olympic gymnast jealous. The pirates, expecting to face drugged-out researchers stumbling around in chemical confusion, instead encountered 2 humans operating at peak efficiency with enhanced reflexes, improved coordination, and tactical thinking that bordered on precognitive. "This is impossible," one of the pirates shouted as his weapon sparked and died. The reports said humans become uncontrolled berserkers under chemical enhancement. The reports, Webb said conversationally while systematically disabling the remaining weapons with shots that required impossible precision, were written by people who don't understand the difference between enhancement and impairment. Dr. Webb Vrex's voice came through the comm with barely contained excitement. You are providing real-time commentary during active combat while maintaining perfect accuracy and tactical coordination. This level of cognitive function during chemical enhancement is unprecedented in galactic literature. Vrex, buddy, that's because we're not enhanced. Torres said, efficiently restraining the disarmed pirates with zip ties she'd apparently produced from nowhere. This is just humans being humans under pressure. But the biochemical readings are showing you what 3 billion years of evolution designed us to do when something tries to kill us, Webb interrupted, emerging from his position with the relaxed confidence of someone whose body chemistry was perfectly calibrated for exactly this situation. We don't get high on stress, Vrex, we get good at it. Captain Scar's voice crackled through the pirate's comm system, sounding significantly less confident than before. Boarding team, report. What's your status? Webb picked up one of the disabled comm units. Hi, Captain Scar. This is Dr. Webb. Your boarding team is taking a nice nap right now. Impossible, my people are trained professionals with military-grade equipment. Your people expected to fight drug-addled maniacs, Torres said, taking the comm from Webb. Instead they met a couple of humans whose natural biochemistry makes your military-grade equipment look like toys. You're bluffing. 15 of my crew against 2 drugged-up researchers. The math doesn't work. Webb looked at Torres, who was displaying the kind of predatory calm that suggested her stress response system was still operating at peak efficiency. Captain Scar, would you like to test that math with your remaining crew? There was a long pause on the comm. When Scar spoke again, his voice had lost most of its earlier confidence. What exactly are you people? We're humans, Captain, Webb said with the kind of patient tone usually reserved for explaining simple concepts to children. We produce what you call combat drugs the same way we produce saliva. It's not a special ability, it's basic biology. But the reports said we produce chemical compounds that enhance combat performance. Torres interrupted. They just failed to mention that we also retain the intelligence to use that enhancement effectively. Vrex's voice came through their private comm channel, filled with scientific wonder. Captain Torres, Dr. Webb, I am observing the most remarkable biochemical phenomenon. Your stress response systems are beginning to normalize now that the immediate threat has passed, but your cognitive and physical performance remained optimal throughout the encounter. That's the point, Vrex, Webb said, feeling his heart rate gradually returning to normal while his mind stayed sharp and focused. Human combat drugs don't make us crazy, they make us capable. This explains so much about human behavior patterns, Vrex said quietly. Your species' tendency toward dangerous occupations, your recreational activities, your historical military achievements. You are not reckless, you are simply biochemically equipped to handle situations that would incapacitate other species. Captain Scar's voice came through the comm one more time, much quieter than before. Dr. Webb, Captain Torres, I think there may have been a misunderstanding about the nature of human chemical enhancement. You think? Webb replied. Captain Scar, would you like to surrender now, or would you prefer to send more crew members down here to test their assumptions about drugged humans? Another long pause. We'll be leaving now. Good choice, Torres said. And Captain, next time you hear reports about dangerous humans producing combat drugs, remember that the dangerous part isn't the drugs, it's the humans. Webb watched through the viewport as Scar's ship began powering up its engines for a hasty retreat. Vrex, I hope you got all that data. You're going to need it for your report to the Galactic Council. Dr. Webb. This data will revolutionize galactic understanding of human biochemistry. The implications are extraordinary. The implications, Webb said finally, allowing himself to relax as his body's natural chemistry returned to baseline levels, are that maybe the galaxy should stop being afraid of humans and start being impressed by what evolution can accomplish when it really puts its mind to it. 3 weeks later, Webb was sitting in what had to be the most surreal meeting of his entire career. The conference room aboard the diplomatic vessel Galactic Harmony contained representatives from every major species in the known galaxy, all of whom were staring at him like he was either a fascinating specimen or a carefully contained explosive device, possibly both. Ambassador Quillen's 7 eye stalks were waving in what Webb had learned to recognize as the Felparian equivalent of embarrassed fidgeting. Dr. Webb, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I must extend our sincere apologies for the recent misunderstandings regarding human biochemistry. Misunderstandings, Webb repeated, raising an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling the galaxy-wide panic about humans being walking drug factories? Vrex, who was seated at Webb's right, with approximately 17 different recording devices, clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. Dr. Webb, perhaps we should focus on the positive aspects of this revelation. The scientific community is extremely excited about the implications of natural stress enhancement. Oh, I'm sure they are, Webb said dryly. Nothing gets scientists more excited than discovering they've been completely wrong about basic biology for the past 50 years. Chancellor Vex Thran, of the Zentorian Science Ministry, leaned forward, his forearms folded in a gesture of formal respect. Dr. Webb, we must acknowledge that our initial assessment was based on incomplete data. The assumption that chemical enhancement inevitably leads to cognitive impairment was flawed. Flawed is one way to put it, Torres said from her position at the far end of the table. She'd been invited to this diplomatic circus in her capacity as Human Combat Effectiveness Consultant, which was apparently the galaxy's new favorite job title. Another way to put it is that you assumed humans worked the same way as everyone else, just with more chemicals. But that raises fascinating questions about human evolution, interrupted Dr. Klix of the Rigelian Research Institute, his crystalline features practically glowing with scientific enthusiasm. How did your species develop such sophisticated biochemical regulation? Most species require external enhancement to achieve comparable performance levels. Webb leaned back in his chair, feeling oddly comfortable despite being the center of galactic attention. Dr. Klix, have you ever studied human evolutionary history? I have reviewed the available literature. Yes. Then you know that humans evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them for about 3 million years. Predators, natural disasters, climate changes, resource scarcity, other humans. Our stress response system didn't develop to make us feel good. It developed to keep us alive when everything else wanted us dead. Vrex's recording devices hummed quietly as he documented every word. Dr. Webb, are you suggesting that human stress enhancement is an evolutionary adaptation to environmental hostility? I'm not suggesting it, Vrex, I'm stating it as fact. Webb looked around the table at the assembled representatives, most of whom were species that had evolved on relatively peaceful worlds with stable climates and abundant resources. Most of your species developed intelligence as their primary survival strategy. Humans developed intelligence and a biochemical system that could optimize physical performance under extreme stress. But surely this enhancement comes with significant drawbacks, said Merchant Blix, who was attending as a representative of the Krillian Trade Consortium, and was probably still calculating profit margins. Extended chemical stimulation must cause system degradation. Torres laughed, which made several of the more nervous species flinch slightly. Merchant Blix, human stress response is designed for extended operation. We call it endurance. Some humans run marathons for fun. For fun. Ambassador Quillen's eye stalk swiveled in confusion. You voluntarily engage in activities that trigger combat enhancement for recreational purposes. We call it exercise, Webb said. It keeps our systems calibrated. You know, so we don't get rusty. The silence that followed this statement was the kind of profound quiet that usually preceded major diplomatic revelations or galactic wars. Dr. Webb, Chancellor Vexthran said slowly, "Are you telling us that humans regularly practice stress enhancement as a form of entertainment?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of ominous," Webb replied. "But yes, humans engage in voluntary stress activation through physical activity, competitive sports, adventure recreation, and what we call thrill-seeking behavior. It's how we maintain our natural performance capabilities." Rex's mandibles were clicking in rapid succession, which Webb had learned meant he was processing information faster than his normal cognitive systems could handle. "This explains human recreational activities that other species consider inexplicably dangerous. Rock climbing, extreme sports, military service as career choice rather than necessity." "Bingo," Torres said. "What you call reckless behavior, we call staying in shape, Dr. Clix's crystalline features were practically vibrating with excitement. "The implications for galactic society are extraordinary. If humans can maintain peak performance enhancement through voluntary activation, they could serve as natural protectors for species that lack comparable defensive capabilities." "Now that," Webb said, "is an interesting way to look at it." Ambassador Quillen's eye stalks straightened with what appeared to be dawning comprehension. "Dr. Webb, Captain Torres, the Galactic Council would like to formally extend an invitation for humanity to resume full participation in galactic society, with perhaps a few modifications to our previous understanding of human capabilities." "What kind of modifications?" Torres asked with the tone of someone who had learned to be suspicious of galactic bureaucracy. "Well," Quillen said, his eye stalks swiveling nervously, "we were hoping humans might consider taking on certain security responsibilities for civilian installations and diplomatic missions." Webb looked at Torres, who was wearing the expression of someone trying not to laugh. "Let me get this straight, Ambassador. 3 weeks ago, you wanted to ban humans from galactic society because we naturally produce combat drugs. Now you want to hire us as security consultants because we naturally produce combat drugs." "The situation has been recontextualized," Quillen admitted. "Recontextualized," Webb repeated. "That's a nice word. Very diplomatic." Rex looked up from his recording devices with the kind of expression that suggested scientific revelation was imminent. "Dr. Webb, I believe I understand the fundamental error in our initial assessment. We assumed that chemical enhancement was the primary factor in human combat effectiveness, but the enhancement is merely a supporting system for human cognitive and physical capabilities." "Exactly," Webb said. "The drugs don't make us dangerous, Rex. They just make us better at being dangerous. And you are naturally dangerous to begin with." Rex concluded with what sounded like admiration. "We prefer the term naturally capable," Torres said diplomatically. "Dr. Webb," Chancellor Vexthran said formally, "would humanity be interested in establishing a new diplomatic position, perhaps Director of Interspecies Threat Assessment and Response Coordination?" Webb considered this for a moment, feeling a familiar surge of adrenaline at the thought of new challenges and responsibilities. Around the table, he could see various alien species trying not to flinch as Vrex's portable scanner detected his biochemical response to the job offer. "You know what, Chancellor, I think I'd like that job, but I have one condition." "Name it." "My first official report is going to be titled 'Why Humans Don't Need Coffee to Be Dangerous: A Comprehensive Analysis of Natural Stress Enhancement and Its Implications for Galactic Security.'" Vrex's mandibles clicked in what Webb had learned to recognize as Zentorian laughter. "Dr. Webb, I would be honored to co-author that report." "Deal," Webb said, standing up and extending his hand to Vrex for a handshake. "Welcome to the wonderful world of human biochemistry, partner." As Vrex gingerly shook Webb's hand, his scanner began its familiar beeping. "Dr. Webb, your stress enhancement is activating again." "That's not stress enhancement, Vrex," Webb said with a grin. "That's excitement. There's a difference." "What is the difference?" Webb looked around the room at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, all of whom were watching him with mixtures of fascination, respect and carefully controlled nervousness. "Stress enhancement happens when something threatens us," Webb explained. "Excitement enhancement happens when we find something worth protecting." And for the first time since this whole bureaucratic nightmare began, Webb felt like the galaxy finally understood what humans were really about. They weren't walking drug factories or biochemical weapons platforms. They were just the species that evolution had specifically designed not to give up.